Good morning. Thank you for joining me. My name is Payton Croskey. As was said, I'm a PhD student at the University of California, Santa Barbara in the Media Arts and Technology program. For this project, I collaborated with a team of researchers and whose multidisciplinary experience spans the development of AI and computational tools, archival practices, and human rights research. Before we begin, I want to clarify how we use the term Black in this research. So we define Black and engage with Black culture and collections primarily from a North American perspective. So we also use Black to describe diasporic people of African descent whose ancestors were enslaved, displaced, and disrupted by the transatlantic slave trade and/or colonialism. Black also encapsulates the political identity of those who consciously act in solidarity with the people and traditions of this global community in tandem with their Black ethnic and racial identities. This presentation will focus on our recent work investigating archives and datasets seeking to represent, amplify, and preserve Black diasporic culture, beginning with an overview of the current state of AI. So from its detrimental effects on the environment, which have been detailed, difficulty representing and identifying Black and brown faces, copyright infringement, and more, AI's issues are becoming increasingly amplified in today's society. Scholars like Ruha Benjamin, Sophia Noble, and more argue that AI's issues are a reflection of the biases and stereotypes of both the person encoding the systems and society at large. In terms of AI, this manifests not only in the model itself, but in the data and technical decisions used to create the model. We focus our research on the data used to train AI models because training data is made up of the information and ideas that will become scaled up to reproduce and reignite influential concepts in our society. So we don't know a lot about the data sets used to train the most popular models today. Examining AI training data is made difficult because the data sets themselves are often proprietary. The scale of such systems also contributes to the lack of transparency. Large language models are too large to parse manually. Even their creators often struggle to understand the models that they've trained. Additionally, due to the scale of these models and the speed at which companies develop them, it is virtually impossible for direct consent to be acquired for each included item. Instead, popular AI models were trained on datasets created by scraping the web for all available materials, then algorithmically curating and filtering the resulting data. The prevailing message coming from corporate AI developers and marketers is that not only is widespread AI inevitable, but the current methods of data collection for AI are the only possible approaches for progressing AI technologies. We argue that there are opportunities to design otherwise. But in order to do so, we must look beyond the current status quo for AI technical methodologies that exist in other spaces. We inform our research using the concept of liberatory technology, which is an emerging space focused on transformative technical solutions to contemporary challenges motivated by ethical principles and the potential to uplift those disproportionately impacted by the tech industry. We extend the term to encompass the ways in which Black and other marginalized communities design technology to challenge entrenched power dynamics and conventional processes, regardless of how disruptive and impractical alternatives may seem. The goal here is to create and implement technologies that are more beneficial than harmful and more just than oppressive. And considering AI through the lens of liberatory technology, we identify AI training datasets as valuable sites for imaginative thinking, considering alternate liberatory ways of locating, processing, storing, and using cultural data. We analyze current approaches to constructing archives and datasets, focusing on those that prioritize community accessibility and thoughtful representation. We situate archival and dataset development strategies in what we call liberatory collections, which are community-based repositories that seek to preserve and uplift Black voices by countering the harms enacted by traditional AI and archival processes. When identifying liberatory collections, we chose collections that met all of the following criteria, which is that they preserved and amplified Black histories, communities, or social movements, implement ethical alternatives to traditional archival or AI practices, feature items that are accessible and open to the public, and finally provide transparent documentation of the collection development process. We identified 14 liberatory collections that we selected for their commitment to representing and preserving previously overlooked aspects of Black culture and movements. We focus on Black communities because they have been historically exploited and marginalized by creators of institutional or otherwise dominant collections. This in turn has led Black communities to develop alternate ways to create inclusive repositories and handle data. We analyze these collections through a multi-step process using reflexive thematic analysis, open coding the collections by examining accompanying documentation. Liberatory collections include repositories like the Afro Hair Library, which is a community-created open-source digital library of 3D hair assets, History Makers, which is a digital archive housing the largest collection of Black American oral histories, and Africa, the first cross-lingual AI training dataset focusing on 10 African languages. We used our analysis of liberatory collections and creators' documentation of their development process to conceptualize themes on liberatory collections, methods, and principles. These include strategies for gathering data and assembling a collection using consent-based methods and human labor, opening access and accepting impermanence by preserving sociocultural materials and hosting community building events and workshops, and valuing participatory work and human contributions by fairly compensating those who contribute their data, time, and effort. In this presentation, I will only discuss creators' strategies for opening access to their communities, as well as the ways they have reconceptualized the notion of impermanence. Traditional archives are cultural repositories meant to be preserved for generations. While historians and researchers can access these collections, they must follow standard procedures to ensure materials remain unchanged. The focus on preservation, however, leaves little room for those outside of academia to explore these collections. Traditional AI training datasets are similarly inaccessible as they are too large to parse manually, as I've said, and often contain data only comprehensible to machines. Liberatory collections, by contrast, prioritize access over standardization and community building over untouched preservation. They hosted workshops, created educational curricula, and allowed their stored items to be changed and updated by members of their community, which is embracing Stuart Hall's concept of a living archive. And to be clear, this means that a living archive is not an inert museum of dead works, but an ongoing, never completed project. In physical archives, artifacts may deteriorate over time and become unavailable, and deterioration is also a risk with AI, as training datasets are sometimes deleted and discarded once a model is trained. But liberatory collections accept and publicize the reality that the repositories may one day cease to exist. These creators hope their success will be measured by their repository's impact on their community, while having been accessible to those represented within the collections. Our analysis of liberatory collections demonstrates how creators prioritize community building, participation, and collective values when crafting sociocultural repositories. We draw on these approaches to suggest new directions for constructing ethical AI training datasets. We identify strategies for challenging the datafication of the archive, reconciling community values and available funding structures, and redefining preservation and success. Again, although all are important, I will briefly describe the ways in which creators reframe the notion of preservation. So despite their many differences, both liberatory collections and standard AI training datasets demonstrate aspects of a living archive in action. Workers in one of the collections call this preservation through use, where the item and the collections are not reminders of a previous time, but relevant concepts that continue to influence today's society. Millward and others align with this concept by describing Black digital archives as maintaining an activist commitment to being publicly engaged, subject to immediate hands-on experimentation, disassembling, and the practice of refusal and dissent associated with collaborative editing. What we're getting at here is the notion that when ideas and movements disappear from active cultural memory, they are no longer preserved, even if artifacts are retained in inaccessible repositories. This is a concept that echoes the majority of the liberatory collections that we surveyed. Now, traditional AI training datasets also mirror a liberatory collection's understanding of preservation, because training datasets are built to generate AI models that will serve as the interface through which future users interact with sociocultural materials. Yet the concepts and learned behaviors that derive from this training phase continuously impact present and future societies by determining the model's behavior. So cultural concepts and artifacts are actively called on and surfaced as people interact with AI, allowing stored materials to live on as they inform future generations. Yet despite this alignment between preservation and AI and liberatory collections, the alignment alone is insufficient to create forms of AI development that preserve and uplift Black communities. In this paper, we detail how AI developers should also focus on community outreach and financially compensating data contributors to become more liberatory. Ultimately, we argue that the future of AI development and AI developers themselves should look beyond mainstream methods towards practices taken by Black data stewards in collecting, handling, and using cultural information in their work. Creators of liberatory collections demonstrate that it is possible to collect sensitive and important data while earning the consent and respect of those represented. They also show the importance of embedding collections within the community, proving that such work can be regenerative rather than extractive. So the path to ethical and effective AI models and applications begins with the thoughtful construction of training data sets, but more careful consent and community-focused practices are necessary through all phases of development and deployment to achieve something truly liberatory. Thank you.